Nicole Kidman has made her first public appearance since her split from Keith Urban.
We've been through a lot together.
We've got a timeline for it now, and the time it's now.
For weeks, Keith Urban said nothing. No interviews, no statements, just silence after a 19-year marriage ended. But when he finally walked back on stage, that silence cracked. In the middle of a song he's sung for years, one word shifted and the room felt it. Not anger, but a sharp, weary honesty. Fans replayed the moment on loop, debating what it meant and who it was for. Was this just heartbreak playing out in real time, or was Keith finally letting the music say what he wouldn't put in a press release? Tonight, we're unpacking what really changed: the lyrics, the missing love songs, and the way a performer's voice can carry more truth than any headline. We'll stick to verified reporting, highlight what fans noticed, and separate emotion from speculation, so you can decide what the music is actually telling us. If stories like this pull you in, tap like so more people find it. Subscribe, hit the bell, and drop a comment with your take. Did the songs reveal anything new, or are we hearing what we want to hear? Your perspective shapes the next deep dive. Recap of the divorce and media silence. When the news broke in late September 2025, the world finally saw in print what insiders had whispered about for months. Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban had officially separated after 19 years of marriage. According to People, Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban separate after 19 years of marriage. The filing, made quietly in Davidson County, Tennessee, cited the familiar phrase that ends so many long relationships: irreconcilable differences. But behind those simple words lay nearly 2 decades of shared dreams, sacrifices, and quiet struggles that the public had never truly seen. According to People, Nicole and Keith had already been living apart before the legal papers were filed. Friends close to the couple described it as a long time coming, saying the emotional distance between them had grown slowly, long before it became public. Sources tell People Keith Urban moving out was a turning point in Nicole Kidman's split, that setting up his own place marked a turning point in their separation. After that move, it was only a matter of time before the fairy tale faded into fact. Nicole's response to the split was everything the world expected from her: calm, composed, and dignified. She didn't post emotional statements or grant interviews. Instead, she turned her focus toward her 2 daughters, Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret, determined to protect their privacy and sense of normalcy. Public appearances showed her graceful but guarded, smiling for cameras while quietly holding her daughter's hands. People quoted a source close to her saying she didn't want this, but had accepted that it was time. That quiet grace only deepened public sympathy for her, the picture of resilience in the face of heartbreak. Keith, on the other hand, chose silence too, but his version of silence was never still. For weeks, he disappeared from the spotlight, saying nothing publicly about the divorce. No press statements, no interviews, no social media activity. But those who knew him knew that silence couldn't last, because for Keith Urban, emotion has always lived in melody. His truth isn't spoken, it's sung. And when he finally returned to the stage, it became clear that the music would say everything he couldn't. The lyric changes, the missing songs, the tone of his voice, it was all there, hidden between the chords. Because sometimes, when words fail, music becomes confession. Keith's emotional collapse and rebirth. In the weeks that followed the divorce announcement, Keith Urban withdrew into a world that few ever see, a quiet, self-contained space where music and memory blur together. The man who had spent years performing to thousands of fans each night now found himself alone in his Nashville studio, surrounded by silence that no guitar riff could fill. Friends told People that he was processing everything the only way he knows how, through music. Those who had seen him during those early weeks said he seemed thinner, quieter, and more introspective than usual, often staying up long after midnight, strumming half-written melodies that never left the room. It wasn't the first time Keith had faced himself in the dark. Long before he met Nicole, his life had already been marked by chaos and recovery. Born in New Zealand and raised in Australia, he'd found his calling in country music, but also his greatest vulnerability. By his 20s, fame had arrived, but so had the temptations that came with it. He spoke openly in past interviews about the toll that alcohol and addiction took on his early career, describing himself as a man constantly running from the noise in his own head. Then came Nicole. When they married in 2006, Keith was at a crossroads. Just months after their wedding, he entered rehab for alcohol abuse, a decision he later credited to her love and intervention. "She saved my life," he once said in a Rolling Stone interview, his voice breaking as he recalled her unwavering support. Nicole stood by him when it would have been easier to walk away, helping him rebuild the balance he'd lost. For nearly 2 decades, she became his anchor, the calm to his storm, the structure to his restless heart. But even anchors can slip, and when Nicole finally walked away, Keith found himself face to face with the same demons he thought he'd left behind. Friends told people he was struggling to adjust and leaning heavily on his close circle, his bandmates, tour team, and a few trusted friends who had seen him through previous lows. This time, though, the fight wasn't just about staying sober. It was about rediscovering who he was without the woman who had once held him together. Night after night, he'd retreat to his studio, the one place where he could still control the noise. The space that had once echoed with shared laughter and family visits now carried only the hum of amplifiers and the faint ring of guitar strings. It was in that solitude that his transformation began. The songs that started as heartbreak slowly became something else: reflections, confessions, questions without easy answers. Insiders described him as poured into his work, writing obsessively, sometimes recording the same track for hours. What emerged from that creative storm wasn't polished or commercial. It was raw, stripped down, and painfully honest. Each lyric felt like a page torn from a diary he never meant to share. Those close to him said this period marked a creative rebirth, even as it carried the weight of loss. Keith Urban had built his career on songs about redemption and resilience. Now he was living them again. Only this time, the redemption wasn't about saving his marriage. It was about saving himself. She once saved him from his demons. But when she finally walked away, those demons came knocking again. And this time, Keith didn't hide. He picked up his guitar, faced them head-on, and turned every ounce of pain into melody. And those melodies would soon reveal more than words ever could. Because the next time Keith Urban stepped onto a stage, his silence would break. Not through interviews or headlines, but through the power of the songs that had suddenly taken on an entirely new meaning. Quick pause. If you're still watching, you're clearly as intrigued by this story as we are. Tap that like button to help more people find it, and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter of Keith and Nicole's unfolding story. The lyrics that spoke louder than words. When Keith Urban finally returned to the stage, the world wasn't sure what to expect. Would he ignore the headlines and play on as if nothing had changed? Or would the music itself reveal the emotions he'd kept hidden? Fans got their answer within minutes, not through an announcement or a statement, but through a single word that hit harder than any press release ever could. It happened during a performance of one of his most beloved songs, You'll Think of Me. For years, it had been a bittersweet anthem about heartbreak, closure, and moving on, a track that had carried him through personal turmoil long before Nicole entered his life. But that night, just days after news of the divorce broke, Keith gave the lyrics a quiet, devastating twist. Instead of singing, "Take your space and take your reasons," he paused for a heartbeat, then replaced it with a new line, "Take your unreasonable reasons." In another concert performance, he went even further, inserting an emotional variation that fans caught immediately, "Take your stupid bullst-tast reasons." According to Taste of Country, Keith Urban adds a new lyric to You'll Think of Me after Nicole Kidman breakup. This change drew massive online reaction, with fans saying it was Keith's rawest performance in years. That one word, unreasonable, hit fans like a confession. It wasn't rage, it was heartbreak wrapped in sarcasm. A word that felt too sharp, too specific to be coincidence. Within hours, social media lit up. A fan on Twitter wrote, "That wasn't just a lyric change. That was Keith finally saying what he couldn't put in a statement." Another commented on YouTube, "He's hurting. You can feel it in his voice." That lyric wasn't random. The clip spread across fan pages and gossip sites, each replaying the same moment, slowing it down, dissecting it like detectives searching for hidden meaning. The media noticed too. Taste of Country described the moment as a striking lyrical change that fans connected directly to his split, while people called it a subtle but emotional shift that reflected the timing of his divorce. To those who had followed his career for years, this wasn't the sound of bitterness. It was a man processing loss in real time, using the only language he truly knew, music. But that wasn't the only song that raised eyebrows. During the same run of shows, fans realized Keith had quietly removed The Fighter from his setlist. The song, released in 2016, had long been known as a love letter to Nicole, a duet celebrating the strength of their marriage after years of struggle. In the track, Keith sings to a partner who's afraid of being hurt again. "What if I fall? I won't let you fall. What if I cry? I'll never make you cry." For years, it was their anthem, one she even appeared in the music video for. But after the divorce news broke, The Fighter disappeared. In its place, Keith began performing older, more introspective songs, tracks like Blue Ain't Your Color and Somebody Like You, songs about longing and regret. When asked by fans why he dropped the duet, he offered no explanation. He didn't need to. The silence said enough. As people later noted, The omission of the fighter from his live shows hasn't gone unnoticed by fans who long associated it with his love story with Nicole. Then came another surprise. The fighter resurfaced weeks later, but with a twist. According to People, Keith Urban changed song lyrics inspired by Nicole Kidman romance to reference new guitar player Maggie. Keith altered the lyric in the song to reference his guitarist, Maggie Baugh, instead of Nicole. Fans laughed at first, but others saw something deeper. A man rewriting his own history in real time. One Twitter user put it perfectly. He didn't just change a lyric. He changed the meaning. He's reclaiming his song. And it wasn't just what Keith sang, it was what he stopped singing. Setlists posted by fans online showed that he had quietly removed several love songs tied to Nicole, including Parallel Line and Gemini, both written during the height of their marriage. Those songs had once been staples of his shows, brimming with romantic imagery and references to his wife. Their sudden absence spoke volumes. To his audience, it felt like a form of quiet erasure, the musical equivalent of removing framed photos from a wall that used to feel like home. Country music has always been a genre built on storytelling, on turning heartache into melody, and pain into poetry. For Keith, it became survival. Every lyric change, every missing song, every deliberate pause between words seemed to chart his emotional recovery. He wasn't lashing out or seeking sympathy. He was reclaiming control over his narrative, reshaping it through rhythm and rhyme instead of press conferences and interviews. As one fan wrote beneath a concert clip, "This isn't the Keith we've known for years. This is the real one, the one who bleeds through his songs." Another added, "You can hear it in the way he plays now. It's not about perfection, it's about feeling." Even the tone of his performances changed. Gone was the polished showman who smiled through every note. Now his voice carried cracks, his expressions lingered longer on certain lines. Applause would rise, but Keith seemed less interested in basking in it. It was as if every chord was a release, every lyric a confession. In one particularly moving moment, during a live version of Making Memories of Us, Keith paused before the final verse. His eyes welled up just enough for fans to notice. It was subtle, but the emotion was unmistakable. The applause that followed wasn't wild or frenzied, it was respectful, as if the audience collectively understood that they weren't just witnessing a performance, but a man coming to terms with heartbreak. And that's what made this chapter of Keith Urban's story so powerful. He didn't expose Nicole through scandal or interviews. He did it through something far more personal, by letting his music reflect what words never could. Each altered lyric and missing love song became a clue in a larger emotional map, one that showed a man both mourning and reclaiming his story. Because sometimes the truth doesn't need to be shouted. Sometimes it's whispered between the lines of a song, where only those who've lived through heartbreak can truly hear it. So Rishin. The symbolic omissions. For nearly a decade, Keith Urban closed almost every major concert with the same song, The Fighter. It wasn't just a fan favorite, it was a musical vow. Written in 2016, the song had been a heartfelt tribute to his marriage, a dialogue between two people promising to protect each other from the pain of the past. Nicole even appeared in the original music video, smiling beside him as they mouthed the lyrics together. For years, it symbolized everything their love stood for: loyalty, healing, and hope. But after the divorce, that song vanished. There was no announcement, no explanation, no official statement. The Fighter simply disappeared from his set lists. Fans who had followed Keith's shows for years noticed the change immediately. The song that once ended every performance, often with Keith smiling toward the crowd, thanking them and dedicating it to his beautiful wife, was gone, and in its place came silence. People reported that the omission didn't go unnoticed, pointing out that Keith's post-divorce concerts felt noticeably different in tone. Where he used to end with love songs, he now favored introspective anthems about resilience and self-reflection. Songs like Somebody Like You, Days Go By, and You'll Think of Me took center stage again. Tracks that spoke of independence, loss, and rediscovery. Before the divorce, his shows were full of warmth and romantic energy, an artist celebrating love he believed would last forever. After the divorce, the set lists told another story. Yahoo Entertainment noted that several songs long associated with Nicole were quietly dropped, including Parallel Line, Gemini, and Female. Each of those had once carried layers of personal meaning. Gemini, in particular, had been widely interpreted as a playful, intimate tribute to Nicole. Its sudden disappearance sent a clear message, even if Keith never said it out loud. For longtime fans, it felt like watching someone carefully erase the soundtrack of his own love story. And yet, there was no bitterness in it, no sign of anger or revenge. If anything, the omissions felt deliberate, even graceful. It was as if Keith was editing his life in real time, choosing to leave behind the chapters that no longer reflected who he was. Maybe this wasn't revenge, maybe it was erasure, the musical version of moving on. By removing those songs, Keith wasn't just altering his performances, he was rewriting his identity as an artist.
For nearly 20 years, his music had been intertwined with Nicole's presence. She was his muse, his partner, his anchor. But now his concerts reflected something new: self-redefinition, a man reclaiming his art as his own. There was a quiet symbolism in that choice. Love songs about her had been replaced with pieces about endurance, freedom, and change. Instead of singing to someone, he was singing for himself. And for a musician like Keith, that distinction mattered. Some fans described his recent shows as feeling more stripped down, more personal. One fan wrote online, "It's like he's not performing for the cameras anymore, he's just performing for the music." Another said, "The set feels heavier now, but also more real. Like he's working through something right in front of us." What Keith chose to leave out of his concerts said as much as what he kept in. Each song removed, each lyric rewritten, each pause between verses became part of a larger emotional statement. He didn't need to say he was hurting. His silence, his curation, his choices, they all said it for him. In country music, artists often tell stories of heartbreak through what they sing. Keith Urban told his through what he didn't. And sometimes, the songs left unsung carry more truth than any words ever could.
Fans decode his pain. The moment Keith Urban began altering his lyrics, fans became detectives. Every performance, every missing song, every emotional pause was replayed and analyzed like a coded message. On TikTok and X, formerly Twitter, clips of his concerts went viral with captions like, "Keith's heartbreak is showing on stage," and that wasn't just a song, that was therapy. Within days, hashtags like Keith Unfiltered, The Fighter Gone, and Urban Speaks Through Songs started trending, turning his live shows into a digital phenomenon. One viral clip from a Pennsylvania concert where Keith replaced "Take Your Space and Take Your Reasons" with "Take Your Unreasonable Reasons" crossed over 1 million views in 24 hours. The comments were flooded with emotion. "You can feel the pain in his voice," one fan wrote. Another said, "That lyric change hit harder than any interview could. He's clearly talking about Nicole." Others saw it differently. "He's not being cruel, he's just being real." That's what artists do. They turn heartbreak into honesty. But not everyone agreed. Some fans called the changes raw and brave, while others felt uneasy, suggesting that rewriting love songs so soon after the divorce was a little too personal. One fan commented, "It feels like he's airing private pain on stage." Another countered, "No, this is him healing in public, we're just witnessing it." The conversation quickly spilled into mainstream media. Yahoo Entertainment covered the viral setlist debate, noting how Keith Urban's subtle onstage changes have sparked speculation that he's processing heartbreak through performance. Meanwhile, TMZ described his shows as a public emotional release, and people highlighted the shift in tone, reporting that his performances now carry a weight and sincerity that fans haven't seen in years. In fan spaces online, there was near unanimous agreement on one thing: this was the real Keith Urban. Gone was the smiling showman who polished every emotion into something camera-ready. The man on stage now seemed stripped bare, tired, emotional, and utterly human. His voice cracked in places it never used to. His pauses stretched longer. Even his guitar solos seemed heavier, less like spectacle and more like catharsis. Some fans even compared his current performances to the raw energy of his early career, before fame softened his edges. "This is the Keith from the early 2000s again," one user wrote on Reddit. "You can tell he's feeling every note." Another said, "He's not just performing songs anymore, he's confessing." As the videos continued to circulate, the emotional divide between fan interpretation and media framing grew wider. Fans saw heartbreak in authenticity, tabloids saw a narrative. Commentators debated whether the onstage emotion was deliberate artistry or genuine vulnerability, but perhaps the truth was both. Keith Urban had always worn his heart on his guitar strings. This time, though, there was no filter, no perfect phrasing, no happy ending. Just a man playing through his pain in front of an audience that refused to look away. Some said he was brave, others said he was petty, but everyone agreed on one thing: this was the rawest version of Keith Urban they had ever seen. Behind the spotlight, who Keith really was. Before the lights, fame, and sold-out arenas, Keith Urban was just a boy in Queensland, Australia, strumming a beat-up guitar in his parents' living room. His father, a store clerk with a love for country music, introduced him to Johnny Cash and Don Williams, while his mother encouraged his creativity with a quiet belief that her son was meant for more. But Keith's early life wasn't simple. Money was tight, and home wasn't always peaceful. Music became his escape, the one constant that could drown out the noise around him. By his teens, Keith was already performing in small pubs, chasing the dream that would eventually take him across oceans. But fame, when it arrived, brought its own kind of loneliness. The bright lights of Nashville amplified everything he had once tried to silence: the anxiety, the insecurity, and the constant feeling that success might slip away at any moment. In interviews years later, he admitted he often felt like an outsider in his own life, saying, "I always thought I had to keep performing just to be loved." That pressure became his shadow. By his late 20s, the same passion that fueled his rise began consuming him. The long nights on tour, the temptations, the restless energy, they all led him down a darker path. He began struggling with alcohol and substances, numbing the fear that without the music, there was nothing left. It was a cycle of chaos and self-destruction that nearly cost him everything. Then came Nicole. When they met in 2005, Keith was already a rising star in country music, but privately, he was still searching for balance. Nicole, with her calm composure and quiet strength, was the opposite of everything he'd known. She grounded him, giving him something solid to hold on to. Just months after their wedding, in October 2006, Keith checked himself into rehab. It was his third time, but this time something was different. Nicole stood by him through it all, visiting him, protecting his privacy, and refusing to let him fall apart. Years later, he'd look back on that time and say in interviews, "She saved my life." And she did. For nearly 2 decades, Nicole became his anchor. When he was restless, she gave him peace. When he doubted himself, she reminded him who he was. In a world full of flashing lights and temporary applause, she was his constant. Their love story wasn't just romantic, it was restorative. Keith didn't just love Nicole, he relied on her. She became his mirror, the person who reflected back the version of himself he wanted to be. But love that deep can turn into dependence. Over time, that connection, once a source of strength, started to weigh heavy. The same stability that had once saved him became for Keith a quiet pressure to stay perfect, composed and unbreakable. Nicole was his calm, but also his reminder of who he might become without her. So when that presence was suddenly gone, the silence wasn't just emotional, it was existential. She was the calm in his chaos, one friend told People, the one person who saw the real him. When she left, he had to face that chaos alone, on stage, and that's exactly what he did. Night after night, as he performed songs that once carried joy, the tone shifted. It wasn't bitterness, it was vulnerability. The smile that once felt effortless became rare. Fans began noticing flashes of tenderness in unexpected places, especially during performances of Heart Like a Hometown, where Keith would display photos of his daughters, Sunday and Faith, on the screen behind him. The moment was always met with applause, but his expression said more than words ever could. His devotion to his girls was unwavering, and in many ways, they became the emotional bridge between his past and his present. Even through heartbreak, Keith's identity as a father never wavered. Those who knew him described him as gentle and fiercely protective, often flying home between tour dates just to spend time with his daughters. In interviews, he'd often mention that they kept him grounded. "They're the best part of me," he once said. And it showed. As the months passed after the divorce, Keith seemed to channel that love for his children, for his music, for his own fragile recovery into his performances. He didn't try to hide his pain, he transformed it. The man who once leaned on someone else to keep him steady was learning to stand on his own again, using his guitar not as an escape this time, but as a lifeline. Behind the spotlight, Keith Urban wasn't the flawless celebrity that fans had once imagined. He was a man rebuilt from pieces, a son, a father, an artist, and a soul still learning how to make peace with his past. And while the world saw heartbreak, what was really happening was something deeper, a rebirth. Quick reminder, loving these inside details? Make sure you've hit subscribe and turned on the notification bell. There's a lot more coming about what really happened behind the music. What he really exposed. Maybe Keith Urban didn't expose Nicole Kidman at all. Maybe through every lyric change, every missing song, every crack in his voice, he was exposing himself. Not out of anger or revenge, but out of vulnerability, the kind that comes when a person's life has been so intertwined with another's that losing them feels like losing a part of your own identity. When fans heard Keith's altered lyrics and saw him removing love songs from his shows, they interpreted it as a statement about Nicole. But look closer, and it becomes clear that the real story was about Keith, a man confronting the weight of his own emotions in front of thousands. His music didn't attack her, it revealed him. It laid bare the dependence, the longing, and the quiet regret that follow when love becomes the center of your universe. For nearly 2 decades, Nicole had been Keith's constant, the calm in his chaos, the balance to his restlessness. She had steadied him when his career wobbled, lifted him when he fell, and given him a family that kept him grounded. In many ways, she became the mirror through which he saw himself. So when she was gone, that reflection disappeared. And in that void, Keith found something he hadn't felt in years, the unfiltered truth of who he was without her. That's what his performances really captured, not accusation, but revelation. Every strained lyric, every softened chorus, every quiet pause between songs felt like a man relearning how to exist in his own skin. He wasn't exposing Nicole's flaws, he was exposing the cost of loving too deeply, of giving so much of yourself to another person that you forget where you end and they begin. Art has always been Keith's form of confession. But this time, it wasn't a story about fame or heartbreak. It was about self-awareness, the kind that hurts before it heals. Through music, he stripped away the image of perfection that had followed their marriage for years and showed the world something far more human, a man breaking, learning, and beginning again. Maybe he didn't expose Nicole. Maybe, finally, he exposed the truth about himself, that even after fame, success, and love, he was still searching for peace in the only place he'd ever found it, inside a song. The bottom line: 2 people, 1 love, and a silence broken not by interviews but by music. For nearly 20 years, Keith Urban and Nicole Kidman built a story that felt timeless, a blend of Hollywood grace and country soul, proof that love could survive the spotlight. But when it ended, their breakup didn't play out through angry words or public feuds. It unfolded through contrast. His voice filled arenas, her silence filled the spaces in between. Together, they created a final duet, one sung not in harmony but in heartbreak. In the end, Keith Urban didn't just sing about heartbreak, he lived it. His songs became mirrors reflecting the pain, confusion, and courage that come with letting go. Nicole, meanwhile, showed that silence can be just as powerful as sound. Her restraint wasn't weakness, it was a form of strength that spoke to anyone who's ever chosen dignity over drama. Their story reminds us that not all endings need to be explosive to be meaningful. Sometimes the quietest truths are the ones that echo the longest. So now the question is yours. Whose silence spoke louder, Keith's or Nicole's? Was it the musician who turned pain into melody, or the woman who turned heartbreak into grace? Tell us what you think in the comments below, and if this story moved you, make sure to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next deep dive. Because while this chapter has closed, the story of what came after is only beginning. And in Hollywood, there's always another twist waiting just around the corner. Next time, we'll explore how the ripple effects of this breakup reached someone unexpected: Tom Cruise, the man from Nicole's past, whose silence may now carry a meaning of its own.